November 16, 2025. It's the fourth year and day 266 of the Ukraine war. Welcome to the Daily Situation Report. Today, I especially welcome all free subscribers and those who want to become one. Let's get started right away with today's hits. Refineries. The refineries in Volgograd and Novokrovichevsk, which had already been hit once before, were attacked and hit again by the Ukrainians last night. According to local eyewitness reports, a part of the facility that had already been damaged was hit, which was actually under repair from the last attack. And that's the case for both refineries. It seems the Ukrainians want to ensure the facility can't be brought back online anytime soon, no matter what. The Ukrainians are mainly using Antonov 196 drones for this attack. You already know the drone from various videos that I have already shown. With a range of about 2,000 kilometers and a 75-kilogram warhead, it is something like the Ukrainian counterpart to a Shahed drone, except that the Shahed is used in much larger swarm attacks and, as far as I know, can also fly a bit higher. While defending against drones, the Russians again struck their own residential building with anti-aircraft fire. By now, we're just as used to that as we are to the daily attacks on refineries. Oh yes, by the way, recently the Ukrainians hit the oil port at Tuapse, and shortly after that the one at Novorossiysk. After just 2 days without exports, this one was made navigable again at a terminal for ships. Today, 2 oil tankers were loaded there, so I assumed that the damage wasn't severe enough to cause a longer outage. I think it was more worthwhile to destroy or mostly destroy the local anti-aircraft positions there. So all the S-400 systems we looked at in the situation report yesterday, now that the oil can flow again. In addition to the previous hits, there was also another strike on the Oriole thermal power plant, which had already been hit once earlier this week. Winter is approaching, but the front still has mild weather with temperatures between 5 and 12 degrees. On the Ukrainian side, they are hoping that Russian attacks will decrease during the winter. On the Russian side, however, they are trying to fully capture large or partially conquered cities before the start of winter. This way, they can prepare their own accommodations for the soldiers to overwinter and also establish new command posts, which they want to use for offensives in the spring. But things look a bit different in Russia. That was only referring to the Ukrainian front because in Russia, far in the east of the country, they've already had the first nights with temperatures between minus 20 and minus 30 degrees there. This is now the opportunity for the Ukrainians to destroy the oil and gas pipelines and pumping stations, and at the same time to have a noticeable effect on the population and the price of oil this winter. That's already happening as district heating prices are surging in the far eastern Amur region. The regional government is planning a 2-stage increase in prices. First by between 49 and 86%, and then again by another 13 to 15%. Calculated over the year, this results in a total price increase of 67 to 115%. This severely impacts households and municipal institutions, especially in poorer eastern regions of Russia. It's really like a slap in the face, and that reflects the growing cost problems in the Russian utility sector, which are not getting any less due to energy prices, repairs, and the backlog of investments. Ukraine's joint force reports a rather bizarre order in the area around Kupiansk. Russian small groups are supposed to raise flags to simulate control. I have to jump in briefly. That's nothing new. We've seen that very often, actually, ever since the bridgehead at Krinky. That's where I saw the very first video where 2 Russian soldiers walked onto a marketplace, stuck a flag in the ground, and the other one held it in his hand. They looked toward the drone, had their picture or video taken with it, and immediately ran away again about 300-400 meters into a nearby forest where they had come from. They didn't really capture it. They just showed up, planted a flag, and left. We've seen this happen many times since, especially on the eastern front and not directly in the east. So now it's more in the southeast where crofts and so on are located, but rather further in the northeast, like here near Kupiansk, for example. And it's not even about them wanting to report false territorial gains, but rather that the Ukrainians are reporting that this actually benefits them a lot. because the Russian soldiers who agree to make such videos or are made to agree to it, they are easily seen by Ukrainian drone pilots, enabling faster location and engagement of Russian soldier groups. According to the article, the whole thing actually highlights quite well how much Moscow is chasing after visual propaganda effects. In reality, only small groups of 3 to 8 men are holding positions in the gray zone, according to the report. But I have to jump in here and say that I don't think Moscow or the Kremlin itself is giving such stupid orders to show the world that they were able to capture the next unknown village or street. I think, and most people will probably agree with me, that this was the idea of the front commanders, who waste a lot of resources, or pocket them themselves, hardly. Report losses up the chain and in the end have to show something to justify their high expenses. It's just easier to put a few teams in danger to take some pictures and prove to the next higher level that you were making some kind of progress. They just pass that on until someone eventually forwards it to the Ministry of Defense. The Minister of Defense believes they've told the truth, passes it to Putin, who then gives another speech. That's roughly how I imagine the whole thing. Near Dnepropetrovsk, the Russians were able to get closer to Mayak and Volodymyrivka. Here, they are already capturing the southern part of both villages. A bit further south, near Pokrovsk, right here. At this spot, not much has changed in the city. There's been hardly any change in the last 3 days. It has actually become a bit quieter. But quieter basically only means quiet on the situation map, because in reality, the fighting here continues to increase. I have now found a pretty good video of a Ukrainian soldier who is taking cover under a wagon. I guess that's somewhere here in this area where the tracks are still partially or completely held by the Ukrainians. So I would suggest we just take a look at it and let it sink in. Is it okay? Is it okay? Oh, Jabat. Now we don't have him. So things are pretty hectic. You can hardly imagine how high the stress level in the city must be. In the city, as I mentioned, there's no visible progress, but east near Myrnarad, we see change. The entire yellow-marked area here is not under Russian control, but there is heavy fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces going on here. At the blue pin at this location, here there is a Russian flag on an old shaft tower. Ukrainians blew it up with a drone soon after. In the red zone, several Russian artillery strikes occurred, suggesting Ukrainian soldiers were present shortly before or possibly survived the attack. But increased artillery strikes were reported and observed here, which is probably why there isn't a Russian soldier in here yet. Here at the green pin, Ukrainians attacked Russian soldiers with drones, which is how we know that they were able to advance at least up to this point here. So in this area, they're definitely here, but less so elsewhere. Somewhere on the Donetsk front, the Ukrainian K2 unit of the 20th Regiment for Unmanned Systems used a ground-based drone to track 3 Russian soldiers. The operator was guided by an aerial drone that had the 3 Russian soldiers in sight. They began the pursuit and followed them until they were standing under the bridge. After that, the drone detonated, taking all 3 soldiers with it. I seriously wonder if they really couldn't hear the drone. Well, you know that typical buzzing and clicking sound of electronic vehicles, especially when they're running on tracks and are homemade. and the drone was just a few meters behind them, first up on the road, where it made the turn and really followed just a few meters behind the last soldier, who also turned around briefly right before that, which I personally find very alarming when you can hardly notice it at such a short distance. Here, a Russian soldier is recording two other Russian soldiers who are arguing because one of them is unhappy and doesn't want to keep working. I think they didn't imagine the war would be like it actually is. Do you actually know why the Bundeswehr vehicles have this sign with the white cross? It's not a coat of arms, and there isn't any field medic equipment behind it. What exactly it is and what purpose it serves, you'll see in my new video. As always, I'll link it in the credits at the end of the situation report. Feel free to check it out and let yourself be surprised. The Deputy Chief of the Main Directorate of Intelligence paints a clear picture of Russia's plans for 2025. Moscow aims to have about 120,000 glide bombs, some newly made and others converted from old freefall bombs using kits. Also, around 500 long-range variants with ranges up to 200 kilometers. In addition, there is supposed to be a glide bomb with a range of 400 kilometers, which is now being developed and will be deployed soon. This would have the incredible advantage for the Russians that they could move everything within a 400-kilometer radius away from the front. That means all the aircraft, which are actually most at risk when they're on the ground, they could be moved so far away that Ukrainians would have almost no chance to attack airfields, even if they tried in the future. Drone production is expected to reach 70,000 long-range systems, including 30,000 Shaheds. So we see a clear goal, namely the increase of medium-range weapons. However, North Korea's ammunition supply is dwindling. The deliveries have more than halved compared to 2024, and about half of the shells are so old that they first have to be refurbished in Russia. Pyongyang is also partially compensating by mass-producing drones, which they manufacture and deliver for Russia. For Ukraine, this means continued pressure from the air due to mass and range, but also targets in Russia's logistics. Priority is given to air defense and electronic warfare against glide bombs and drones, protecting critical infrastructure and targeting carrier airfields, bomb kit depots, and assembly and supply lines. This is doable and familiar to us all. However, I see the biggest problem with attacks on Russian airfields that are located outside the occupied zone. The Russians no longer scatter wildly when a Ukrainian drone attacks. Now, more and more units are carrying smoke grenades with them and throwing them around so that the drone can't see how they are spreading out. A drone defense soldier now uses a shotgun to find a good position under the cover of smoke and shoot down the drone from there. It works well in theory and practice, but it's usually more than one drone. And if you get attacked 2 or 3 times, you'll eventually have used up all your grenades. Special thanks to All Guy Crew channel members, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renicky. Thank you for listening. Feel free to subscribe, like, leave comments, and see you in the next situation report.